Let me take a look at what do you got. I'm moving to the speculation station a lot. Speculation station.
Hello!
Hi.
And welcome to today's Speculation Station podcast.
I'm Will, this is
Tom.
And the general idea is that one of us brings in a mystery object. This week it's Tom.
Yes, I'll be preparing an object and I'll be using a question deck in which we have exciting cards to spice up the conversation a little bit. But otherwise, it's just us, locked in a room.
No internet.
No friends.
No knowledge other than the stuff we got up here in our heads.
And all done in a single take.
One single take somehow, and that's what we do.
Right, let's do this, guy. All right.
Do you want me to close my eyes?
I think you ought.
Right, I'm going to close my eyes. Should I hold out my hands? I'm doing my Australian accent. It's a real good one.
Real convincing, I tell you that
Thanks,
much.
Chip.
The Australian accent won't help you with this object.
All right, okay.
So I want you to have a little feel and see if you can guess what it is. Can you guess what it is?
It feels like it's a case of some kind, immediately. Mm-hmm. It feels like, I don't want to break it, because it feels like there are, okay, there are, oh, here we go. Oh, there are keys. It's an object I was thinking about bringing myself. Is it a calculator? Is it a graphic calculator? Yeah, it's a, what do you call it?
Scientific calculator.
It's not quite. I was thinking about bringing in a calculator as well.
It's got graphing functions on it as well.
That's it. Yes, they're kind of, it's way beyond my knowledge. Because we had to have them at school at some
switch it on
point.
if you want.
It is the EXE button? No, you can figure out how to turn it on. It's your bloody scientific calculator.
Oh.
Why scientific? Why not, just mathematical?
Because that's an interesting point, because it's all the things used for science, I guess. I'm assuming that.
All the things used for science. He obviously knows a lot about
absolutely, because you need all those sort of... And I assume it's to excite the children who use them, because adults don't... It's certainly working.
I'm going to guess that your batteries are run out.
No, they're fresh batteries.
It's not turning on, though. This is already a failure,
It's fine.
No one's going to watch this. Oh, here we go. There's an on button there.
I know, it just doesn't always...
Oh, look at that. So we have run, stat, list, graph, table, program, which I presume is program.
Run is the normal calculator mode.
Okay. So I'm going to test you on your calculation skills correctly.
Excellent.
So 77.
Oh, God.
Just quite an easy one, times 3. That should be quite easy to do, right? 77 times 3.
75 times 3 is 225.
Wow, it's impressive you know that.
Plus 6, which will be 231.
Well done. That's impressive. That would have taken me hours to get.
I'm not a mathematician, I'll tell you that.
How come you know that 75 times 3 is 225?
Because I just did the calculation very quickly in my head.
Oh, so that would even, for me, I'd have to
the way I chunked that down in my brain,
sure.
in my brain, was to go, okay, I know 275s are 150. Easy,
that's true.
Easy mode.
Okay.
And I know if I
had another one, it's,
and all you need to know is, okay, how much do I need to make the next 100? That's 50. Oh, so that's just 25 on top of that.
Okay,
really easy, and then you just add the leftovers.
Logical explanation of how you did that. Thank you. I'm almost terrible at mental arithmetic.
I'm not great. I'll admit, I'm not great.
Sure, but you did that calculation.
It was fairly easy though.
It's an interesting object.
It's got a lot of shape to it, hasn't it?
Thank goodness for the power of the electronic calculator. The kids at school had to grow up with abacuses. Oh, what's the plural of abacus?
Abaci. Abacapodes?
Abacapodes is great. Or is it abaca?
But you're forgetting. There's abaci.
Well, cactus becomes cacti. Depends if it's Greek derivative or Latin derivative.
Anyway.
Oh, we have to get to the bottom of that. Well, listeners and viewers can tell us which one it is. What do you want to know? What you got for me, Chief?
What about slide rules? You forgot.
Oh, which is actually still used in some way?
They're pretty handy. I think if people want... But people use calculators now to stop kids, obviously, just using their iPads. Because you could do all the same stuff on your iPad, or on the internet, or using Wolfram Alpha, or some other similar piece of online software or website. You could just do all the stuff you could do on a scientific calculator, but there's something about it that you're not connected to the internet, I guess. It's not... Because it's bigger than a phone, but it does less than a phone.
Actually, it's about the same size as... I mean, in terms of its surface area.
Sure.
Some of the big modern phones...
really big...
Isn't it weird that mobile phone technology, when we were kids, they were big old bricks, and the trend was to get smaller and smaller. And then in the last few years, the trend has gone, actually, you know what?
The screen.
Well, yeah, because everything is done on one single screen. And it's become the device, hasn't it? The phone.
The smartphone. So, and it's like a smartphone, but there's something about the discipline of the calculator, the real solid keys that give you something. The shift function as well gives you 1,000.
Yes, I just realised that's how I turn it off. Was shift on is off.
Yes, exactly, which is confusing.
It basically means I'm now a mathematical genius. Now I know how to use it properly.
So let's test you mathematically.
Oh no!
I thought this would be.
This is going to be a lot of dead air for the podcast. I'm just going to warn you straight away.
Okay, so.
Oh no! I'm gearing up.
91.
91
divided by.
No.
Divided by 4.
Well, that's going to be an irrational number, isn't it?
Not an irrational number. That's a slightly different thing.
Is that not the same thing?
An irrational number is the square root of 2, for example, which makes no sense in our language because there's no way we can get around it. So we create things like irrational numbers and imaginary numbers and other things like that. So don't worry about that. It's a perfectly rational number. But it has got little bits after the...
It's like 22 or 23 point something.
You are bang on.
Yeah?
It's 22.75.
Okay, so between 22 and 23. Okay, not too bad, but I didn't get an exact answer.
But division's much harder than multiplication.
Do you want to know how I did it?
Yeah.
I did it by doing multiplication instead. I just worked out what takes me up to around about 90 in terms of...
And then added on some bits.
Like, if 10 times 4 is 40, so double that must be 80, so I've got 20 times 4, and then add like a few extra 4s.
Lovely, yeah. Maths. All right, speaking of
maths... Or as the
maths,
Americans say, math.
course, which is a big difference.
Massive difference, yeah. Why do they do it? You know this, right? Why do they say maths and maths? No? We never found out.
There's no distinction. It's not like aluminum or aluminium. I think it's just the way we happen to speak. And I think the way that British people... And I think the reasoning for both is actually pretty good, that I've heard. The reasoning for math is, well, you just chop it off.
Yeah, exactly.
You just chop it off there. But the reasoning for maths is the word mathematics has the S on the end.
And it's a plural, so maths.
So it sort of sounds good.
Both are fine.
Both sound good. I really like doing the maths thing.
Yeah, so the people don't know if you're about to say the American or the British one.
Exactly.
Oh, you jester.
I like to leave people in suspense.
What's the, just before we move on to a question, what's the plural that's always the weird one? Data.
Of course.
Which is technically a plural, but most of us conversation use it as singular.
And it's technically... Yes, because it's a datum is singular.
That's right.
So these, and I will, and you certainly hear mathematicians, scientists speak in a very careful way, and they say these data.
Yeah, those data, these data. It sounds really odd.
It is bizarre, but it is correct and absolutely fine. But it's also fine to use it in the uncountable fact, because that's also the point. Well, the way we use it when it's singular, it's entirely uncountable as well.
Yeah,
not just accountable.
It is data rather than it is a data.
But it's actually a countable noun, which is datum. And it's pluralizes to data.
Have you ever heard anyone using the countable datum?
Almost never.
No.
But I think I probably have heard a scientist say a datum. But even then, I think they were being a little bit playful with
deliberately
it,
on the nose.
Yeah, so
okay.
All right, so are there enough of these?
Good question. Probably not enough in the parts of the world that maybe we could use them more, where kids could use them to elevate their level of
math. They have smartphones, so why would they need these?
But again, in parts of the world where perhaps technology of that level isn't so easily accessible to children.
You say that, but most of the world, if they can't get most things, can at least get hold of some kind of phone.
It's pretty ubiquitous, so perhaps actually there's probably enough of these as there needs to be. I remember when I was at school, there was calculators everywhere you looked.
Absolutely.
Spare calculators in teachers' drawers and what have you. Yeah, so yeah, maybe there's enough calculators, and as you say, with the ubiquitous smartphone, everyone's got a calculator in their pocket.
Let's continue talking on the smartphone comparison area. Where do you think this actually has a... We were sort of talking about this a little bit before. I mean, does a functional calculator like this actually have a purpose now that we have smartphones?
For the average person, probably not, you're right. Because of the smartphone, it's more of a technical requirement for people in the technical professions, science, the mathematics, engineers.
But you just get an app on your phone, as I said before.
That's true, but would you rely on it as much? Actually, that's an interesting point. How does it function? You know, what are the algorithms inside it?
That is a computer.
A computer, yes.
Of course, yeah. It's not a mechanical calculator.
Well, mechanical in the sense of things working is what I meant, but I guess a calculator app on a phone is just reliable if it's the same set of computerizations.
And you can make a graph on there, but you can probably make a graph on the phone.
I bet you can get a graph app for your phone.
Oh, yeah, and you can do like algebra on this.
How often do you use this yourself?
Rarely, but
yeah.
I every now and again I'll crack it out.
Is this the one you had at school?
No, it's not actually. It's the one I got it when I was doing sort of very short, when I was just doing a little studying on cosmology, actually, back in the day. I just did like one module of a Open University course because I was interested. I wanted to get more of a sense of learning about the galaxy and how that kind of science worked. I wouldn't call myself an expert on it, but it was fun. That's why I got it. But I use it now and again for that kind. If I want to do a little equation here and there, I find mathematics quite pleasurable here and there.
Oh, so do I. I was saying to you the other day, wasn't I, that at night, lying in bed before I sleep, I thought I kind of test myself with relatively easy mental arithmetic. It's just an interesting thing to be able to do.
It's good to stretch the brain. And there's something about algebra, and it's quite fun to draw a little graph. So you make, I'm going to do x times 12. 12x plus 7.
So you're good with these kind of formulas, like Excel spreadsheets. I'm terrible at.
Oh, yeah. Whereas Excel spreadsheets are kind of easy mode.
You can make them dance and draw you pictures. There was actually a Japanese guy who couldn't afford things like Photoshop for making digital art, so he used Excel instead and made remarkable pieces with it. I have no idea how it works.
Well, it's just a giant calculator that you can make work however you want.
Sure, but I don't associate calculators with artistic output.
Well, you can even make anything in Excel. You can make computer games in Excel. Of course, as a friend of ours has done.
Which is like black magic to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And even to me who understands Excel, I can sort of see where you begin to do it, but
the whole idea of programming and code is beyond my understanding.
Even to me, sort of code is. I'm interested in it, but it's not something I get intrinsically. I do think it is.
Out of the two of us, you're definitely way better positioned to get it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But Excel is something that people often think is wizardry.
I do have that problem. I overthink
but it's not. It is super simple. It's very basic. And what I always found hilarious is was it something like The Deadliest Warrior? I think it was Deadliest Warrior
TV show, yeah.
Well, the TV show, they were we're using powerful software to to calculate
to match up these ancient warriors.
What we got was an Excel spreadsheet, and
that's what you're doing.
They literally had an Excel spreadsheet.
You actually see it on camera.
You saw it on screen.
I mean, to be honest, that wasn't the most scientifically rigorous of shows.
No, but that sort of like shows the point that people sort of believe that Excel is a complicated thing, compared to something like Word, which is you just put words on a page.
Which is, for me, yes, perfectly easy.
Perfectly logical, but it's not as complicated as people think it is.
For those people who might not know, by the way, The Deadliest Warrior, I guess it probably was rather than is, I don't think it's still running, an American TV show where they laughably compare different soldiers and fighters from different eras. So you might match up a green beret against a Native American warrior. So it's often one-sided.
And then they go do an Excel spreadsheet to decide who wins.
Yes, and then they get a guy standing in front of a ballistic gel or some pig meat and they shoot at it.
They do a computer animation.
And then they do a kind of reenactment with low-paid, out-of-work actors. The whole thing is wonderful and it's cheesy, but if you're looking for an actual way of comparing armed forces from time utterly awful. But what a cool concept. If only they had done it. If they'd done it rigorously, that would have been a really interesting thing.
I think if they'd done vaguely comparable ones, is more interesting.
Yeah, sometimes they did the more comparable ones.
I think that's more
like
interesting.
Spetsnaz versus, SAS.
That's perfect. Or you do sort of a Mongol warrior versus a Roman soldier.
Yeah.
Because they never really met. What would that be like?
Yeah.
Or even like a Chinese, let's go away from the Chinese. Let's go to a Janissary.
Janissary?
Which is like a Turkish guy with a gun. Oh. With the early gunpowder stuff. You take that versus, the early gunpowder units in Napoleon's armies.
Musketeers.
That's what I was looking for. Musketeers.
In fact, a lot of these types of units I've learned, maybe the same for you, learned about from Sid Meier's Civilization games.
A lot of it's Sid Meier's and other similar games like Age of Empires.
So I never really played those.
Things like Hoplites and stuff
Hoplites, yeah.
Which are the classic Greek.
The Greek, yeah.
Who obviously held the Persians at bay in a number of different places.
Which they did in the sequel to 300.
Yes, which is...
Have you seen it?
Of course.
Dire.
Yeah, it's also the more interesting part of history. And I think actually both parts of the history where they sort of got rid of the Persians are actually fascinating, and because it's less about civilization versus anti-civilization, which is how it was couched historically. That's how we talked about it.
It's two different civilized cultures.
It's one really big civilization with a massive army versus a small local civilization with really, really, really appropriate technology for where they live.
And tough dudes.
Even the tough dudes, it's not. It is a bit about the drilling and the tough and the warrior culture they had, and the fact there was lots of mercenaries in the Persian army is a big deal.
So there's less cohesion.
Exactly, less cohesion. And it's just the fighting tactics were really strong, and the cohesion as you said, between the different soldiers in the army is massive. But also the fighting tactics were massively suitable to the area they were in. So loads of closed areas in mountain passes in Greece, which is really difficult for these large armies to deal with. So they could just choke them off, and that's how they won all those fights.
The hot gates.
Yeah.
The first film was, I mean, for its historical setting, it's interesting, but the first 300 was, for its action, groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And I rewatched it so many times when I first saw it, because it's just Blaffy in the slow motion, and buff dudes, can't get away from buff dudes.
Good old buff dudes. I like my buff dudes. But but I actually hated 300 the first time I watched it. But I watched it on my own. I think that really spoilt it. I was like, oh, you can't really see the wide shots, and I lack of wide shots. But when I just watched it for fun with friends again, I really enjoyed it, and I just had a great time. Movie. And yeah, as you say, buff, oiled guys.
Yes.
What's more?
I remember seeing some making of behind the scenes stuff.
Beards too.
Yes. But they famously, like Gerard Butler and the gang, they would hold, like, do bicep curls with heavy dumbbells just off camera before they go on, so they look as oily and buff, which is very similar to filming Predator.
Oh, of course.
With Arnold and Carl Weathers, and Arnold was saying that he and Carl Weathers had a big friendly rivalry because they were both huge buff dudes, and they'd both get up early in the morning before filming, and they'd go into the gym and they'd pump and they'd try and look the biggest and oiliest on camera.
I'm sorry, the thing I remember from Predator the most is that bit where, like, Dutch, who's Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, do this with their hands.
And they clasp hands together in the middle, and their biceps pop out.
And with veins popping out.
That's a very popular meme now. Have you seen it?
No.
So it's the picture of the two biceps and the two hands clasping.
Yeah.
And you generally put one type of people on one of the biceps, or one classification of things or people. Another classification there's often a pose on the other bicep, and then in the hands you put a thing that brings them together.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yes,
I'm glad that
it is quite sweet. It is used quite sweetly, actually.
Yeah,
yes.
I like that. That's very positive. All right.
Yes.
On that positive note, let's move on to a question card. Does anyone avoid this? Being calculators rather than muscles.
I don't want to avoid calculators. Well, I guess people like myself who struggled with later mathematics education at school. But saying that, you put a calculator in front of me at school, great, it's a time-wasting device. So much of my school days were spent wasting time fiddling, we talked about in a previous episode.
Yeah, of course.
So buttons, and of course the classic thing to do with calculators, which is to do what? Make rude words.
May I
make it say
especially
boobies?
Boobies, it's upside down and stuff. You had to do
you do it upside down, yes, where things like sevens become L's.
Can you write a rude word now?
I can't remember many of the rude words, but I can do you instead. How do I make it run? Press EXE. Okay, so do you have to do it backwards as well once it's upside down?
Upside down, I believe.
Upside down and backwards, maybe.
I think that's how you had to do it, yeah. I'd be really impressed if you can do it. And I think it's just a common thing, like creating catapults with pencils, like sticking chewing gum on people's faces. To be fair, certainly at school, people knocking each other in the balls and stuff like that was just a sort of part of the horseplay of being...
the horseplay of school days. The horseplay of
being a boy at school.
See, now the numbers on this are a bit more... Numbery than they used to be.
Yeah.
But do you know what that says that I've typed in? It's not a rude term. Not rude at all.
They're L's?
The 7s are L's. The 5 is an S. The 4's meant to be an 8. It's shell oil. Right?
I get it, that's good.
Right?
I don't know if the camera can see this, probably not.
Probably not, so we can try it. But yeah, back in the day, it was fun to see what else you can make it right. Don't put it over there, I need it close to me. My object makes me feel safe as well. But yeah, we just used to play around with it. And there's something very tactile about the keys. Listen to that.
Do you remember the thing that helps you remember the different...
Sine, cosine?
Do you remember the word?
No.
SOHCAHTOA.
Oh, SOHCAHTOA.
Yeah?
Right.
Every school kid had to remember. Do you remember what they all are?
No, not at all. Sine over cosine.
So is it sine, cosine, over cosine?
over tangent.
Yeah, tan is tangent.
Tan, yeah. So, over SOHCAHTOA. Over,
Tangent.
I don't know. I can't even looking at the calculator doesn't give any clues. You have to. What was TOA then? So T is tangent.
Tangent.
And then I guess O is over again. Is it something? What's A? Oh, you don't even know the answer. You can't bring it out without knowing. I guess it is a speculation station.
Yeah, no. So again, the idea to remember SOHCAHTOA.
There are a few.
Yeah,
would that count as a mnemonic device?
It's amazing we don't remember it as well.
No, well, exactly. I also remember in physics class the fingers pointing 3 different ways. That was part of physics, remembering stuff. What was I guess one of the first types of those things we would have learned as kids would have been the rainbow colours mnemonic, which is Richard of Orange, fought in vain, something like that. You remember that?
No.
You don't remember Richard of Orange?
I remember Richard of Orange, but I don't remember this.
It's like something like Richard of Orange fought in vain. So Richard read of Richard of Orange.
What was the idea?
I know the of wasn't actually a word, so orange was orange.
What was it to remember? A piece of history?
So no, to remember the colours of the spectrum.
Oh.
So fought in vain would have been, well, vain would have been violet.
Okay, yeah.
And indigo, blah, blah, blah. So, but again,
indigo,
I don't remember
do you know
it.
indigo was added in by,
No.
I think it was Newton, because he had a bit of woo-woo going on, and he
Sorry, what do you mean by he had a bit of woo-woo going on?
He was a bit mad and believed in conspiracy magic bullshit.
Oh, did he?
A little bit of that.
He was also a bit of a tosser, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, but still a genius who basically set up the world of modern science as we know it. So.
And interestingly, his position at Cambridge, his job and his title, is exactly the same one that the late great Professor Stephen Hawking held when he was at Cambridge. Same position, hundreds of years later, the same job as
it's the same Royal
Newton.
Society as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of history there. Something on that line I read a while ago. I love anything that can help you understand the relative timescales of history. So Oxford University is older than the Incan civilization, right?
Fascinating.
And that Cleopatra was born closer to the moon landing than she was to the building of the pyramids. That's crazy, right? It's...
Well, yeah, and Cleopatra's really interesting in general anyway, because she's effectively just a Greek monarch.
Yes, and I only found out quite recently playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I think. I'm quite a big fan of those games, and Cleopatra's the main character in that. And the whole Hellenic dynasty having control in Egypt was something I didn't really know much about.
And on the Ionian coast along the basically, which is along the Turkish coast there as well, those massive Greek city-states all the way along there.
It's a lovely part of the world as well. And then the Dalmatian coast further down from it, which I haven't really been to much, but I think it's got a place like Croatia.
In the area of the Fertile Crescent, where Western civilization is supposed to have basically begun. Like places like the Sumerians and all that kind of thing.
Assyria.
Where cuneiform and things, those languages come from. So I think
it's very important for this part of the world.
Absolutely. And it's believed that from then is also where the division between at least the Middle East and the West began, is in those early times when the Fertile Crescent, which is obviously quite dry and deserty now, wasn't back then.
Yeah.
And people were forced out of it. So and apparently, I'm told that's where people find the division between East and West.
On a similar note about the origin of peoples and things, there's been a couple of big finds and studies recently which seem to suggest that the notion of it all began in Africa, or began in Africa as we often say, maybe not true. We may have begun elsewhere off the African continent.
Along that note, there's a good argument that various similar humans developed in different parts of Africa. Completely sort of evolved in the separate pockets of Africa and gradually mixed together. So it might be a sort of smorgasbord of different kinds of sort of human evolutions, of closely related ancestors who are kind of the same species but not, that kind of thing.
What would our early ancestors have thought of a calculator?
That's an interesting point. I think they would have struggled with understanding the concept.
Sure.
But I think in classical times, once you...
Ooh, if you give it to Da Vinci, he probably would have worked it out pretty quickly.
That's a bit more Renaissance.
Oh, I just class everything in the past as
I'm talking like Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Epicurus, all that Eratosthenes.
Aristotle had like a hardcore maths gang.
Yeah.
Where, first of all, women weren't allowed on pain of death, I seem to recall.
Of course.
And something like any conversation that included the idea of the concept of zero was right out. You weren't allowed that.
The concept of zero, I believe that comes in from India or something like that.
It is an Indian thing, yes.
And we use Arabic numbers for a fantastic reason. They're much better than Roman numerals.
God, are they? Yeah, geez, oh.
But another interesting thing about, I think it's Aristotle and a number of the philosophers, I don't want to say it's definitely Aristotle, but it was the obsession with perfect solids. So, do you know what a perfect solid is?
Are these like shapes like cylinders and spheres?
Kind of, but they're shapes where the faces are all the same. Exactly the same shape. So there's certain shapes, so a 6-sided dice, all the shape, that's a perfect solid.
Okay.
A 4-sided, so most of the dice is a perfect solid.
Now, what does sphere count? Because it doesn't really have surfaces.
I think it does count among the perfect. Although I don't want to say, but I'm pretty sure it did count. And like the 20-sided dice with it's got all millions of triangles.
Of course.
All the same.
Yeah.
All the dodecahedron. That's got, I think it's pentagons.
Yeah.
Pentagrams is something else.
That'd be great if it was all pentagrams.
If you want to summon some kind of demon.
Yes, your satanic dice roll.
Very nice. Okay, so shall we
take another question from the deck? Why not?
So, do you want this in your life?
No. Got
Why
no
not?
purpose for it. Well, like we mentioned earlier, I've got my phone for most ordinary calculations, and I do use that. Actually, I got to say, I usually use the calculator on Google most of the time because I'm sitting at my computer when I need to do calculations for finances and tax and whatever it might be.
I similarly use the one on DuckDuckGo for the same reasons, which is a similar search engine.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. You just put it in and it just does it. It's kind of handy when you're doing...
At least we're not the BBC. We don't have to say that other search engines are available. The BBC, people might not know this around the world, but the BBC has these really strict rules about... Obviously, the BBC can't advertise. So if someone mentions Google, for example, on the BBC, they generally then have to say, like, oh, by the way, there are also other search engines like Bing and so on. They have to... Yeah, they're very strict on themselves about it.
I have heard Bing is really good.
I mean, who uses Bing?
I know people do.
Although weirdly, the Japanese use Yahoo, which is really odd.
Very strange, but because they got their foot in early.
I guess, yeah. It's weird that they still exist, and they still exist in the West as well.
Just in general, you don't Yahoo something though, but you Google something.
No, I actually asked Jeeves. Oh, Jesus. Oh, jeez.
I think they were trying too hard, because you can still ask a question in Google. They were trying too hard to make it something that normal people would understand.
Yeah.
Is Ask Jeeves still a thing? Can you still go there?
I bet you can probably still go there, but I guarantee people probably don't.
People don't worry about the search results coming from search engine keywords and stuff like that when it's coming from Ask Jeeves, or even I think they care about Bing. I think Bing's about 20% of the search market.
Really?
I think it's something. It's much bigger than you think it is.
Okay.
And lots of third-party services that search
use Bing. Yeah, that's right. That's because Microsoft insinuate themselves into that.
Google aren't not guilty of that too.
Sure.
All the tech giants have their thing.
It's just so much a part of our normal everyday lives now that we don't think twice about Google. And also, the Google front page is so unassuming. Just that generally white background, little search bar, the Google logo, and that's it. So it's hard to attach any sense of foreboding with that. It's just a white page, but I use it to give me knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it off again. There's something... I get a bit anal seeing it turned on the table.
Eating the battery.
Yeah, even though it's not mine and I don't care and you can replace the batteries, something in my brain goes, that's bad.
The fresh batteries I put in today.
Oh, so especially for this?
Exactly, to make sure it was functional.
No, you see, I thought they were old because they look like cheapy old batteries.
They are cheap batteries.
So why didn't you go for name brand batteries? What are they?
I usually would, but I just bought a pack of cheapos.
Ah, they're supermarket brand. That's excellent. They're from good old Morrison's.
Yeah, of course. Supermarket brand, own brand batteries. Did the job.
Batteries are a crazy thing.
Yeah.
It baffles me how that works.
And how does a battery work? Can you explain it?
Contains power. Stored power. So, I can't explain it. I could try. Some
Remember the first batteries? How they...
So this was going back into classical times with amphora or pots of acidic liquid, and then dipped within that were wires or coils.
Yeah, I think the actual wires and coils is a bit later on, but maybe they did. I'm not sure.
They had some. I'm sure they had a coil of something.
Battery. Then the sort of early, I think it's Faraday. I might be making a mistake here. The stacks of, I think is it copper plate. I think they have some chemical between them. I'm not.
Yes, you're right.
I'm not sure exactly
wish I could remember what that chemical was. Name acetone or something.
So maybe you're right there.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Well, that's why we're here. We're speculating.
But sort of the functioning of batteries, as you say, is fascinating because we think of electricity as something that's just energy.
Yeah.
And how do we get it? We
do a
coal
thing,
plant, and we get something, a dynamo
motion,
whizzing around,
activity.
And and two magnets come together, spin past each other really fast, moving electrons, and then pump those electrons into
so the idea that
our microphones, into our calculators.
Yeah, a little static cylinder having that power in it is odd to think about. It's
incredible, and the fact you can charge it up like with rechargeable batteries, which
those were big when I was a kid. I remember we had those for our Game Boys. Think about it,
but they're usually proprietary, i.e., they belong to the device. Your smartphone has a rechargeable battery.
That's true. I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
sure.
The classic rechargeables. Where you get a little plug device that you put them in, and they'd be sitting recharging for a while before you could use them again.
Do you have a drawer of odd or old batteries somewhere downstairs?
I have a drawer of batteries that are useful. I don't.
That's what I mean.
I don't keep old ones.
Well, but sometimes you just have them from years ago. They haven't been used yet.
That's where those batteries came from.
Well, there you go. I'm glad
the drawer
to know
of
that.
batteries.
Everyone has.
Mostly used to control the zapper, the
you mean the TV remote?
TV remote.
Zapper. You're showing your backward rural upbringing there.
Sure, yeah.
The zapper.
Well, unfortunately, it was because of Frank Zappa that it was called this.
Oh, in your household,
in
interesting.
My household, yes.
Right.
I believe that was the reason, anyway.
I think it was just the remote for us. Or telly remote. Telly. Turn on telly. We had to ask permission to turn on the TV as kids in my house.
I don't remember that, but probably. TV was fairly restricted, for sure.
Yeah. My mum can be quite anti-TV for kids, at least, which I understand, but at the same time, what's the worst that can happen? Telly's telly.
Well, they could, watch something unsavoury. But now they've got their smartphones for that.
They can see everything, like Peppa Pig 24/7.
Yes, all that Peppa Pig. So much Peppa Pig. I mean, how much Peppa Pig could you watch on your smartphone?
As much as you could. Actually, maybe not. But there's a lot on YouTube.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I think it's interesting what some stuff like YouTube does to the future of...
all entertainment, all media entertainment,
because music's just free on there.
I know, it's great. It's great for exploring new music and getting really, old songs you haven't heard since your childhood, or
build
for
your
me,
own playlist on there if you want.
Yeah, for me, it's things like jazz, which I love, and I've only come to quite recently. So I can type in a jazz musician I know well, like Thelonious Monk, right? And then it'll start recommending ones I haven't heard of, and I love that.
Just like with when I was exploring electronica for a while, I was into Electro Sun for a while. I found this band. How can I ever find another band? And by random suggestions, a lot of them are not very good, but then in amongst there's a diamond in the rough every now and again.
Yes, we talked recently about the glory that was Grooveshark for a small time.
Of course, yeah.
Where it had a lovely system of recommendations, and you could click whether you liked something or not, and if you liked it would try and find more like that. If you didn't, it would try not to do that anymore.
Other services like Spotify, like iTunes, I believe, try and attempt that. Yeah. But it just...
The Grooveshark's way was simple and clear. Yeah. Yes or no, or indifferent.
The interesting thing about Grooveshark is, though it did have a lot of course... famous music. It had a lot of music that you wouldn't have heard anywhere else that you stumbled across. You stumbled across a lot of niche that you wouldn't have found. Yeah, there was Pandora, which was I think the first of those radio stations. I tried for a while. It never really worked for me, but yeah, Grooveshark was for me the height of all of those. But I think they got done because they was not exactly using the copyright in a fair way.
Did you say they was instead of they were?
They was done, yeah.
They was done for doing the copyright, yeah?
They did them good.
Did you ever use
Napster?
They nicked them. Did you use Napster back in the day?
Napster, of course,
Kazaa, LimeWire.
Kazaa was really the one. Kazaa and LimeWire were the ones that when we were...
Yeah, I didn't really use Napster. I used Kazaa and LimeWire for music a lot. Yeah. And Futurama episodes. Sorry, don't sue me. Futurama executives who obviously didn't care enough because they cancelled it 1,000 times anyway.
Yeah, which is a shame because it was an A series.
It was super A.
Speaking of that, let's move on.
Speaking of Futurama, here's a question that relates not to it at all.
Okay, so how much money would I make if I sold this calculator?
Well, it's a scientific calculator, so I'd hope you get more than a standard calculator.
So yeah, give me a monetary value in pounds, dollars, pence.
Well, you've got to find the right client, haven't you? You need to create
You're
demand.
going to sell it as a collectible, is that what you're saying?
Oh, I like that.
Right.
I mean, it is Casio, so it's a name brand.
Which is the classic calculator brand.
And something else that's become very popular with Casio objects, again, recently, is old digital Casio watches.
Of course.
Very popular with the hipsters. I totally understand why.
Maybe a hipster could wear a calculator.
Oh my goodness, attach a strap to it. Maybe not across the wrist so it's sticking out, but across the forearm.
I'm thinking more...
Like a Pip-Boy.
A pendant.
I was thinking like a Pip-Boy from Fallout.
Oh, that is pretty badass.
Where you tap on your arm. No, have it lengthways so it goes along the forearm like that, right? You'd have to rearrange the screen.
Start creating some
it's
kind
a bit
of
like
weird list on this calculator now. I don't understand.
Calculator, please create a list of numbers. Taking us back to the Predator, the movie, he has this cool control panel on his arm. You can press buttons and it opens up and it gives him stuff. That's always cool, right?
Yeah, any kind of control panel. I think that's what it feels like. I always really like the idea, and this is something that's often talked about in the future. I really like the idea is if you can get... Okay, so we're going to make technology very printable, very flexible, so we're going to have flexible machines. Wouldn't it be cool just to have a T-shirt that just has a calculator printed on it?
I think that exists.
Dum, 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 dum.
I had a T-shirt someone bought me and had a graphic equalizer on it.
Oh, that's cool.
And it would respond to music, and I did take it to a club once.
Oh, that's cool.
So in the dark, people see it. Horribly, though, a really Larry dude took offence to it in the club. He's like, what are you fucking wearing that for? I was like, I'm just wearing a nice shirt in a club with music.
It's a fun shirt.
Yeah, it's part of why I despise clubbing sometimes. Especially
absolutely.
In certain parts of the UK, you get some
People
real
like being
Larry
aggro.
types. Yeah.
And they're like getting onto you for how you're dancing, how you're dressed, how you're doing whatever, when everyone's just there to have fun, right?
Yeah, that's what it should be.
That's what dancing should be.
That was a night of like 8 hours of drum and bass. And as much as I like drum and bass, 8 hours of it, you're like, hey, it's
pretty intense.
Okay, it's got too much into the base of my skull now.
A lot of drum and a lot of bass, not a lot else sometimes.
Yeah. Because it's that's generally that same kick and snare rhythm, boom ga, boom ga, boom ga, boom ga, which is lovely, but after 8 hours of it,
right,
your brain's
I think
turned
that's the
off.
case with any kind of music. If there isn't a variety to the set, you're
it's
listening.
weird that you and I went
music,
to
not so much though.
Yeah, so I was going to say. So with you and I went to the excellent Whirly gig in Camden all those years ago.
Yeah. Though I saw people taking heroin, which wasn't
in the corner,
super
right? That's
pleasant.
horrible. Yeah,
It wasn't pleasant.
But unlike drum and bass, you've got even less variety because it's just 4 in a bar, boof, 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 boof. But the variety comes from the melodies, the drops, the rhythms.
The pads.
Yes, the pads.
Just the width of sound that you get from dance music in general, trance. I mean,
trance is close to our hearts because it's heavy, but it's also melodic, and that's what.
And it's so euphoria. It's euphoric. I think it's just that feeling that it just goes. It bypasses the thinking part of the brain and goes straight to the soul,
straight to the emotional,
and almost straight to the muscles in some ways. Because you just move. I can't help myself when I'm listening to dance music. I just want to dance.
Yeah, the louder and bassier, the better.
But also, paradoxically, I find it very useful for concentration. Sometimes.
Yeah, I can dig that.
Very similar to classical, I find. I don't know why.
Sure.
There's a sort of weird similarity. Maybe it's the instrumental nature of it.
Yeah. I need to listen to more classical music, really. Yeah. It's one of the few music genres that I don't spend much time to go out of my way to listen to.
I think it's just good when you're doing something. Classical music.
But there was someone saying recently that that's actually doing a disservice.
That's fair.
Classical music, when it's just background music, because you take away the majesty and the power of what was intended in the composition.
Yeah, sure. And I've seen live classical and I've really enjoyed it. It's an
That's
experience.
True. I mean, almost all music becomes infinitely better live.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's music I wouldn't listen to, but I'd hear it live.
Oh, yeah,
and happy.
absolutely. Yeah. Even a rubbish band at a...
Like Coldplay? Would you be happy listening to Coldplay live?
I don't know. I mean...
Sorry, Coldplay fans. We despise the blandness.
I would... If I was with someone who liked Coldplay, I'd be fucking happy.
Yeah?
Because at least they were having fun.
Yeah, and I'd join in. Social time.
I'd join in, I'd have fun, I'd enjoy it as much as I could.
And you'd probably have to sing along to some of the songs, right?
I'm sure I could try.
There are a couple of okay ones, but generally it feels like wet cardboard to me.
Yeah, they remind me very much of Travis.
Travis, and we always say this, there's another one that we can never remember at the time.
Is it Arctic Monkeys or something? No, they're a bit different.
No, they are different. Snow Patrol was a big one. It was really bland.
It's really interesting. Because I'm sure they're much better, more talented musicians than I have no insult.
And successful. They're successful musicians.
They worked hard. I have no problem with that. but there's something about the music that just doesn't grab me in any way, shape or form. But I think for me, I'm not a lyric person. I don't listen to lyrics. That's why I'm not really into rap music. I can respect it. I occasionally enjoy it. But I think if you're somebody who's into lyrics, then you like something like rap, or you like more singy songs,
indie rock pop.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas for me, it's all about the sounds, and I like foreign singing because of that. I really like.
You don't have to worry about the lyrics.
I don't care about it. It's just the sound of the voice.
Yeah,
is much more interesting to me.
See, talking about indie rock pop bands, The Killers.
Ooh, they ring a bell. I'm afraid I'm.
The big hit from them was Mr. Brightside. I'm Mr. Brightside. That's really terrible singing, but you might remember that. That song, so they became huge over here with that hit. That song came out when we were probably about 16, 17, somewhere around then, maybe a little later on. So but since then, all those years ago, Mr. Brightside has never left the UK singles charts. Never ever left it. It remained in the top 40 for over a decade. That's how popular it is in this country. It was relatively popular in America. And I think, if I remember correctly, the Killers were kind of struggling to make it big, especially in their home country. And they came over here, released Brightside, and the whole thing blew up. So apparently, British people just respond very well to that song, and they continue maybe 2 decades later. Maybe not
crazy.
2 decades, but almost 2 decades later.
It's not something I know well.
It's an interesting bit of modern music history.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And although I'm not a big fan of their music or that song, I mean, you can't argue against that staying
if people
power.
like it, people
obviously do, and they continue to keep liking it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about anything you don't like. You've got to accept that some people like it for some reason.
I don't have to like it, but I can accept that they do, for sure. Yeah.
Just let it go.
Yes.
Let it go.
I have learned to let it go in my old age. When I was a passionate teenage fan of metal, and this is often the case with metal fans, anything that's weaker sounding than metal is dismissed as being shit. Which I understand, but at the same time, it's a really, really dangerous attitude to have. And I learned over the years to actually not just appreciate other music, but love it for what it is, and know that metal isn't the be-all and end-all of everything.
Absolutely. Even with I don't even know how to describe it, the over-sentimental music that I find very difficult.
Sure.
Very, particularly pop, where it's just a little bit too...
Saccharine, perhaps, as well.
Saccharin's a good word, where it's really overly soft and ballady. I think ballad's perhaps the word.
I hate ballads,
It's just
generally.
like, there's something about it. I cannot, in my soul, understand why people enjoy listening to that kind of music, but... if it makes you happy,
fair play to you, more power to you.
Each their own and all that, I guess.
As we say, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, very nice.
I'll be happy with the music I've got, thank you very much.
I'm glad to hear it. So, which version of the calculator is the best? Would you scientific? Would you say the desktop, the one that comes up that's used in shops?
We've got one at home like that, and we've got one, our one has a little solar panel on it.
Yeah, so that's a classic.
That's a good one. I would say the best version is the simplest version. The classic Texas Instruments calculators back in the day. Because this one scares me.
Yeah, it's
intimidating. Too many functions. Intimidating is the word, thank you. Yeah, it's really intimidating. So a classic simple calculator where I know where I'm at. I'll tell you what, a good version of a calculator, and it wasn't just a calculator, but relates back to what we're talking about, those old Casio watches. Did you remember those watches that
had calculators?
Tiny buttons and calculators, and they worked as TV remotes as well.
Yeah, and kids wanted to use those to cheat at tests and stuff, and they had to ban them and stuff.
Absolutely, and kids at our school used them to turn on the TVs in classrooms and stuff once you worked it out.
What do you reckon of the calculator that you get on the classic Windows calculator? How do you feel about that?
I haven't used that in years, actually, because I tend to use the online ones.
It just works. It's actually got a scientific calculator in it as well.
Does it really?
You just switch it to scientific mode.
Okay. Could you use Excel as a calculator?
Yeah, I mean, it is effectively a giant calculator.
Big calculator, right.
But you have to sort of do it yourself a little bit.
So for me, the simplest version is best, or the most fun version, like I say, the watch versions, but something like this, intimidating.
But if you want to add loads of numbers quickly, really, potentially Excel is your best choice, because you just go, I've got 26 different numbers there, rather than sitting down and adding them on a calculator one by one. I just go, whoop, donk.
Sorry, you go what?
Whoop, donk.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so yeah, whoop, donk.
Very mathematical.
Yeah, it's perfect maths.
That's the sound of if the calculator made that sound, I'd be very happy.
Whoop, donk.
Jing dong joing, jing bong bong. Yeah, and then it makes a nice soft golden bing when it's got the answer for you.
Because it takes that computing.
Yes, it has to wait.
Computation complete.
The answer is 2. That can't be right. I'll ask you for the square root of 2.
which is not rational.
There's it says mem. Is that a memory function?
Oh. No.
How do we get to it?
Though I think I've remembered what SOHCAHTOA is.
Ah, excellent. Before we finish, go on.
I think. So, because I think we were confusing it. So sine over an cotangent.
Oh, it's cosine, isn't it? Not cotangent.
So cosine. So it's about the sides of the triangle you're talking about.
Right.
That was the issue. So h is hypotenuse, SOHCAHTOA, h is the hypotenuse, is the adjacent side, the side adjacent to the angle. So it's talking about the different sides of the triangle.
Oh, that's right.
So so you use sine when it's related to the whatever that side of the triangle is, and use. Does
it depend on what type of triangle? Like, have you got isosceles compared to right angle?
I don't think that matters. Okay. I don't think that matters with sines. It matters for a lot of things, but isosceles, scalene triangle.
I've not heard of that.
Scalene's the one where none of them match up.
None of the what? What the edges?
Isosceles is when the two long sides are the same length.
Oh yeah.
Equilateral is obviously everything's the same.
Right angle.
There's a right angle triangle, but which I usually is a scalene, I think. But scalene's where all the sides are different lengths.
Oh, that's good. I didn't hear. I know exactly what you mean now. You mention it. Isn't isosceles a lovely word?
Oh, it's a beautiful
word. Isosceles. I'm guessing that's
It's
Greek.
got the word sauce in it, which sounds like sausage, which is a good.
It rolls
sound.
off the tongue.
Isosceles. It does.
Isosceles. I can't stop saying that.
So we'll have a little top off question to finish.
Top off
question.
Top off.
I think this is kind of appropriate. And I'd like you to take a historical bent on this question.
I sure can, mister.
A historical bent and a future bent on this question.
Stop saying bent, please.
Why does this exist?
Well,
I want you to begin in the past and lead toward the future if you can with this.
Begin in the past, lead towards the future. Well, we've always sought to understand and explain the world around us. We talked a little bit about earlier about origins of mathematics. India was important with this number 0. Babylon is largely credited with the origin of mathematics. So, actually, wasn't it a pure convenient function that we needed to better understand the division of sold items, crops and wheat and so on. So if we can understand how to divide it better and sell it more accurately, we get mathematics. So then we have to work out how to do that more and more accurately. And I think my main point, so from my opinion, like so many things, like almost everything about our human experience, we're attempting to make everything easier and better.
Yeah.
So a calculator just says all that complicated shit that we do about making understanding of how we do things. It's just the most convenient form of that.
That's interesting. I mean, it brings us back to a point we've discussed before, which is we were talking about cuneiform and the earliest languages. And Linear B, I think that's a famous one that a mathematician actually.
What's that? Sorry,
it's an ancient language that nobody could decipher for years and years, and then one genius mathematician. I really wish I could remember his name. Just worked on it and just solved it on his own.
Amazing
that he could do that just by working out how he could working out a sort of code for it. But what was interesting about most of the early languages is they were used for kind of bookkeeping, effectively, to take care of all the things that run your society, like who owes how much grain is stored where, who's bought what off whom. It's a record keeping thing. Right, that came before any creative use of the written word.
Yeah, which is again very functional, isn't it?
Yeah, like obviously the classic form of writing I believe it's the Incas who didn't have a writing form, but they kind of did, where they tied knots into string to keep track of all this thing, and their written language is essentially knots in string.
That's so different.
I think it's the length and the amount of knots and
sounds like something made up for a sci fantasy story.
Does sound like, probably because they've based it on that exact idea before. I can imagine.
Gotcha,
I can believe they have. But yeah, it sounds like something so foreign and because it is. It's something we can't even imagine how they would think. But it was probably a really small cabal of scribes. Rope-based scribes.
Yes, can you use the word scribe if your language is rope-based? Maybe you're a knotter. Ropier. Love that.
A ropier.
I'm off to work, to the ropery.
Well, do you think, could we go back to ropes for calculations? Do you think we?
Because they have been used for calculations as well, haven't they? Yeah, indeed.
That was one of the big parts of it. Yeah. I think you can do certain maths quicker that way. I might have made that up. That might be hearsay. Or rubbish, or whatever.
Also, ropes are still very useful in terms of measurements as well. Measuring something by rope, and of course, where we get the term knot from, which is the maritime term for measuring the amount of knots that go past, and taking the lead, which is measuring the depth underneath the keel of the boat with rope as well.
Oh, lovely! I like that. That's a...
You know me and my love of maritime naval traditions in England, right?
Yeah, you've got some great terminology. Yeah.
Oh yeah, take the lead and Helmer Lee and watch out, Mr. Bush.
Leeward.
Leeward, yes.
Oh yeah. Oh, and especially back in those days, you still got it, of course, in hornblower and other similar things. They didn't say starboard and port; they said starboard and larboard,
which is odd.
Which is super confusing. And the reason they changed it to port was because it was super confusing.
Yeah, if you're in the middle of a battle and you shout like larboard, like what?
Is that starboard or larboard?
Yes, it was larboard. What?
Could you clarify?
Port. Speaking of port, you might remember where the word posh comes from.
Oh.
Which stands for port out starboard
home. Of course,
which was for, at the time, this was, I guess, just slightly pre-Titanic era, I guess, whereby the fashion for Western ladies was to be as pale as possible, unlike these days where a tan is a sign you've travelled.
I believe that comes from Japan, actually. That was part of it.
Yeah.
Because there was a huge, particularly in Victorian England, there was a huge Japanese obsession. That's why we had the parasols became popular as well.
And I guess a certain elegance, right?
That particular elegance, certain styles became vogue in that era. Because I think it's maybe because that was when the British and the other European nations started trading with Japan, because Japan sort of started to open up, and the European nations were aggroing their way in there with their business
that makes
really
sense.
quick. So, and it just became really sexy and cool and fashionable.
Yes, so these pale ladies, when they were travelling by ship, I'm guessing, I mean, if I was clever enough, I'd work out which east or west they were going, but when you were leaving port, I'm using the word port in a different way now, when you're leaving port, you'd be on the port side of the boat, the left side of the boat.
Leaving harbour.
Because it was the opposite side to where the sun was. And when you were coming home, of course, you'd go on the starboard side to avoid the sun. You wouldn't get tanned, you remain pale. And from that, we have the word posh, which for anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure most people know, it's used in the UK and other places.
I'd say around the world,
to mean people of the upper class, people of the highest state of elegance.
But it also just confers elegance, classiness.
And classism as well.
Yeah, absolutely, all of them.
People
and
who
snobbery.
want snobbery, absolutely, yes. Poshness is often...
Haughtiness in general, I would say.
Haughtiness, aloofness, loftiness.
All of that sort of looking down. But also it can be used quite positively, because you know, you go to a restaurant and you get something that's slightly normal, more normal than usual. It's perfectly common for a British person to go, "Oh, that's right posh."
That's right posh. That is.
Yeah, that's proper posh.
Well, I'm quite posh in the sense of I was brought up in a more middle to upper class environment, upper middle class environment. I went to a posh school. And a lot of people would say I speak in a relatively posh way.
You speak posh, for sure.
But not as much as I used to. I probably used to speak much more public school.
Yeah. Any poshness in my voice is a lie.
Oh, you are relatively posh. Yeah. Manufactured poshness.
For sure, yeah.
Which is something a lot of people aim for anyway, in attitude at least, in culture. People love the idea of being more posh.
Well, I certainly like the idea of speaking well. And that's something
yes.
That's obviously I need to perfect, as we all do.
That's something my mum says to the kids she helps at school. You know, you don't have to be posh to speak well.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely true.
I think that's a good way of putting it. And on that note, I think we should end it, because we went from numbers to words.
Oh, that's lovely. And poshness.
Right. Oh, excellent. Thank you so much with today's calculator. Thank you very much for coming along. Calculate with us, you know, maybe put your calculations in the comments if you fancy it.
Do you like calculators? Do you have a fancy calculator?
Yeah, do you think the scientific calculator is relevant in the day of smartphones?
Good question.
Probably not.
Okay, don't answer that one, we've already answered.
Probably not, but prove me wrong. So I was going to say from all of us here, because from both of us here, from all two of us. From every one of us in this room.
From everyone in the speculation team. Well, sometimes Kaz is here, but she's not here today. There's no one to talk to, so it is just the two of us, but we're very glad you came. We'll see you at the next episode of The Speculation Station
Podcast.
Oh, I forgot to add podcast. We were close enough.
See you next time.
Bye.
Speculation Station.